Hey, when tragedy and trauma happens, there's a process that you go through. It's different for different people in different situations, but we still have to live our life. And a lot of times, especially with things like medical trauma, relationship problems, other things that happen, many aren't our fault. There's certain habits and things and coping mechanisms that we're left with that prevent us from moving on the way that we should. So today, as I go through my day, and I want to give you 6 different truths about going through tragedy and trauma that you have to recognize before you can truly move on. If you don't know me, I'll put my story in the links below in the description. I've got 35 years of dealing with major tragedy and trauma, and not just struggling through life, but going through some and encountering some really incredible things and really being able to survive. And I share my tips about change, trauma, PTSD, anxiety that help you get through that. So come with me on my day and we'll share that stuff. When tragedy and trauma happen, we have big changes in our life. There's usually things that cause coping mechanisms, or maybe we're physically different, or maybe we're out of a bad relationship and we have had to learn how to do things. Maybe we've lost a spouse or had medical trauma. Those all cause us to do things to cope with those situations. But once we're through it, or getting through it, or needing to go through it and move on, there's a lot of those coping mechanisms can actually trip us up and make it harder. So I want to talk about that a little bit today while I'm going through my day. And funny enough, I just wanted to have a show where we talked about things and different issues and how to deal with PTSD, anxiety, trauma, change, those kind of things. But I've got a little bit of personal tragedy and trauma going on in my own life again. So you're going to go through my day and I'm going to talk about them. That's what caused me to reflect on truths, 6 truths that are true that you've got to do if you really want to move on and get through a tragedy. First of all, let me just say that when bad things happen, it's understandable. This isn't a, hey, you need to shape up your life video. There's a lot of dicey things that happen to people that really cause real hurt, and it's understandable why you have trouble dealing with stuff and you're left with scars and things that really hinder your life. So I'm going to go through that a little bit while I'm driving. Today I've volunteered a free clinic. We're doing a lot of things, really cutting edge things with that we're going to do all over the state. I'm a volunteer, so just like everybody else, but I'm the founder of the clinic with some other people, and I'm the director. One of our new clinics that we're opening up in another town that I'm going to later today is having some hiccups. I've been through it before, but it's really hard for the volunteers, and there's some things that we've got some unique challenges that I've never faced before. So I've got to take responsibility for that. I've got to talk to those people. I've got to make sure I have answers, which I think I do, but we've got to work through it together. There's a lot of things going on. Trials happen to everyone. That's a point. And a lot of times, and if you're somebody that's trying to help somebody going through a trial, don't give them that advice. It's not helpful. They know that bad things happen to everyone. Either they're trying to do better, maybe they're not, maybe they're just defeated, but a lot of bad things happen to people that it's understandable that you get in spots and you have trouble dealing with stuff. But when I say that, I'm looking at it from a little different perspective. And that is that something that I've been through, somebody else before me, no matter what it is, they've been through it too. And some have succeeded and some have failed. And that's good, because I have a way to look at what others have done to try and find ways that I can do better. And the other part of that is it's encouraging, because it tells me that I can get through it because other people have. So the possibility is there to get through a trial, come out on the other end. That reassures me, even with my story. That and once again, if you don't know my story, I'm putting a link to a video interview that I did in the description. You can see a little bit about it with my spinal cord injury and all the infection problems that I had. I've learned some things over the years, but it's been difficult. So I took on a lot of responsibility as a volunteer. I've got a reputation of figuring out how to do things. Leftover effects from the spinal cord injury is having infections, and they'd been really bad, a couple of months, and I'd be they'd turn into blood infections several times a year. That had all went away a little over a year ago, and enabled me to do a lot more. But lately, the last month or so, I was in the hospital again, and then I got another infection going on right now. So it looks like that problem's back, which is going to make it very difficult to be able to do this stuff I do. I'm going to feel horrible. I know it. And it's just going to make things tough. When tragedy and trauma happen, we have big changes in our life. There's usually things that cause coping mechanisms, or maybe we're physically different, or maybe we're out of a bad relationship and we have had to learn how to do things, lost a spouse, or had medical trauma. Those all cause us to do things to cope with those situations. But once we're through it, or getting through it, or needing to go through it and move on, there's a lot of those coping mechanisms can actually trip us up and make it harder. So I've still got to do all this stuff that I've committed to, because people are dependent on me, and I'm the only person that can do. I'm not the only person, but I'm close to the only person that can do it. I've got to be able to function on days that I'm sick, and sometimes I'll be in the hospital. It's a lot of stress. I'm going to feel bad. It's like having a bad flu all the time. It just makes things miserable. So I've got to deal with that stuff, and with our free clinics, we're starting a new type of free clinic, because a lot of the rural free clinics were struggling, and we had to come up with a new way to do it using some of the modern technology, which a lot of us rural clinics couldn't afford before we had to close anyways. And we came up with something. We worked for a year and a half. It's working out really well, but we've run into some unintended problems. We've started a new rural free clinic in a town about 40 miles away, and there's been some hiccups. So I'm going to meet with them because it's my responsibility. I'm running all the clinics right now, and I have to visit with them, and they're going to be, they're all volunteers that want to do ministry. They expect more out of me. That you go into hopes working at a free clinic that, hey, we're going to make a difference and everybody's going to come, and it's going to be really fulfilling, and that happens. But there's problems that we didn't encounter, so that we're having trouble getting patients to come in. Of all the ironic things, free medical care, getting people to come in, but it's a thing because they're beat down too, and a lot of times they operate in crisis mode, which means they don't deal with stuff until it's a crisis, which is why a lot of people in that situation go to the emergency room and urgent care, and we're left paying the bills, or they're left in a spot where they can't pay the bills. So it's tough getting them to come in and get them established for preventative health care, which is what we do. Primary health care for working people that don't have insurance. We like to get them in beforehand, and we get those conditions that maybe they have a medicine they can't afford or something like that. We get them in, and we give them free medical care. Thanks to our donors and our efficient way of doing things, we can treat a patient for about $18 to $25 a month, and that's diabetes, insulin, any the normal problems that you run into that they wouldn't be able to afford without insurance. But we've run into a struggle post-pandemic trying to get people to come in. It's just one of the weird things that have happened, and so we're having a lethargic response, and they're wondering why, and I'm wondering why, and so we got to come up with a way to deal with it. So I've got that stress, and I don't feel well because I'm getting sick. I'm getting an infection, and my primary care doctor may be in pretty quick. So this video series will kind of turn into an unintended reality show, but that's good because it helps me to think, and it reinforces some of the principles that I'll mention and some of the ways of dealing with stuff some of the videos. It'll give me a chance to show you the ups and the downs, because it's not an easy thing, especially if your life has changed and you have bad circumstances, and especially something that you didn't do to yourself, like cancer or a family member or having a medical problem or something like that. Those are really tough circumstances, and it's really hard to deal with them sometimes. So I'm headed out to our main campus of our free clinic now. We got a couple of things going on. We got labs running for our main campus tonight, and then I got to get things ready so I can head over to the satellite campus. We're supposed to run a clinic tonight, but we just don't have enough people responding yet. So I'm going to meet with them, and we're going to talk about it and talk about some ideas and answer some of their legitimate questions and tell them about some of my concerns too, because I worry about stuff like that. So, because I care about the people that volunteer. Medical people spend they're a group that's put a lot of capital in, and they get really, really stressed. They run into, it's hard to be a medical person. So the fact that they're volunteering outside of their regular job makes it, I always want our experiences with our free clinic to be fun, and as fun as it can be. Take away a lot of the things that they have to deal with in the real world in their own clinic that makes it so much of a burden nowadays. So anytime things aren't anything other than non-stressful, it bothers me, and I want to get it fixed as soon as possible. So it's a stress to me. So I'm going to deal with that right now. I'll talk to you in a few minutes about some more. So number 2, and this is a hard one, don't make your trial your identity. It's very hard to do. A lot of times, for me as a spinal cord injury and with all the clinic stuff going on, and there's a lot of problems that needed to be dealt with, and now I'm sick again. And if I'm sick all the time, there are certain times where it's just overwhelming, and it would be easy for me to say, hey, I'm sick, I can't do this, I'm sorry. That it would be totally understandable. For me, if I start making my handicapped person with infections my identity, then everything revolves around that. And I wind up not getting done what I need to get done. And not only that, it causes me to live just through that lens when there's so much more that I am. A lot of times when we go through a trauma, either mentally, physically, we have our loved ones going through a trial, it's understandable that everything flows through that lens. But at a certain point, when we start wanting to shut down, or when we're doing things that are difficult for us to do in those circumstances for our own health and to be able to serve others. Now, I'm not talking about putting yourself out there in a spot where your physical health's in danger, your mental health's in danger, but I'm talking about going through a trial that causes you to want to isolate yourself from people, or you just want to quit in a very detrimental way. When you make your trial your identity, especially from a medical standpoint, it causes you to use that as an excuse for not doing things that need to be done for your own health. So it's very difficult to do that, but we need to be careful about that. And like, once again, it may be understandable and it may be emotionally right, but it lacks the responsibility that we need to be able to carry on our lives. And it's already difficult enough when we go through those trials, to make it more difficult by shutting down and making that our identity and throwing it up as a defensive measure to everybody around us. No, I can't do that because I am whatever your trial is. It's not, in the long run, it's not helpful to you. So although you may have problems, and there may be times where you're too sick to do something, or emotionally you're just broke down and you can't function, that's okay. Just don't start using your trial as a reason not to do things when it's difficult, because you'll find yourself making habits that in the long run will be very harmful to you. So when going through my day today with everything going on, we've got labs getting ready to go on at this clinic here in Shawnee, and that's not going well because of the winter weather, and people had flu. I'm getting ready to head to the other clinic where there's problems. So there's stuff that we can work through. It'd be very easy for me to say, oh, I'm sick and I just can't do it. Well, I can. It's going to be difficult, but for the, the the benefit of others and myself, because I don't want to get in a habit of quitting. So I'm going to say, look, I failed here. I'm not doing good here. I could do better here. And it's really not even a matter of failing. It's dealing with problems. And there's going to be some hiccups in life sometimes, with especially when you're going through bad stuff. I'm going to say, okay, I'm the things aren't going well here. Maybe I'm falling short in some areas, or I could do better. But I'm going to keep at it. I'm going to fight the good fight, because my identity is not wrapped up in my personal stuff that's going on. And my identity is not wrapped up in things that are going wrong in the clinic, because there's so many things going right. And for example, at the clinic, a lot of the rural free clinics have either shut down or they're on the verge of shutting down because they they haven't been able to be successful through the pandemic. They need new technology. We need to be gathered there. We're not in one group. We're not linked up electronically. And our little clinic and our group has figured out how to do that, which is great. We've got a foundation that's helping us to get the equipment. We're managing to figure out a little rural free clinic, how to open new clinics for like $75 to $100 if needed. Be mobile, have cutting edge technology. We'll be able to connect doctors from Oklahoma City or Tulsa to rural areas. We'll be able to even out things that this will really help rejuvenate free medical clinics for working people that don't have insurance that need it, which in turn will help rural hospitals. It'll help people keep working and feed their families. And we've got people from our state health department that's interested. They're helping us because they know the problem and they can't find solutions either. So we've got here the solution that will help in a long ways. It's not the only solution, but it will help fix a lot of the people that don't have insurance with medical problems in the state. And a lot of it's dependent on me. And I don't want to, I don't want to burn myself out, but two, I got to keep going and I've got to keep trying. I've got to figure out how to do stuff. So if I fail and I need to do something again and I need to keep trying, it's not going to be, I'm not going to let myself think, okay, I'm not going to cop out and say it's because of what's going on medically. I'll deal with that, and there'll be days that it's a struggle, but it's never, this part of me will never be my identity. It's just a part of who I am. It's something that affects me, but it will never control me. And that's the big point. Never let it control you. It will affect you, but don't let it control you. And that leads me, while I've got a minute before we leave, it leads me to another important truth, with number 3, which is always have a reason for failing, but never make an excuse. Never let your trial be an excuse. Let it be a reason. Never let it be an excuse. What do I mean by that? And it's important that we differentiate those words, because it kind of goes hand in hand with the last point. An excuse it seeks to justify failure. It's like, well, I didn't because it's not my fault. And maybe it's not your fault. Maybe it is. Maybe there's things that need to be better. That's okay too. But making an excuse is a way of shutting people around you down and saying, well, it's not my fault because I'm sick today, because I have an infection going on, because I have a disability and it's just too much right now. So, and the reason that that's important to you when you're going through this is because it just gives you a reason to quit when it's already hard in the first place. Nobody's saying it's not hard. It could be very hard. But the way you think about stuff helps to control whether you get through it eventually or not. A reason is more of a diagnostic tool that helps you say, okay, I failed and I'm using that today. I have reasons why things aren't going well. Some of them could be my fault. Some of them may not be. There's a real problem right now with the free health clinic getting patients to show up. You never would think that would be a problem. But like I said before, they live in, a lot of times they're dealing with crises too. So they live in a crisis situation, which means they don't go get health care until something bad goes wrong, which usually means the emergency room. So I need to look at myself in a different way also, which is, okay, there's a reason that we don't have a lot of patients coming to our new clinic. But not to make excuses. Okay, I had some clinic stuff to do. Now I'm back on the road. So you want to use reasoning and excuses, and the difference is a form of self-diagnosis and reflection. And once again, when you're going through the shock and the trauma of a personal trial of some sort, we want to be careful about that, because as you go through something traumatic, there's stages that you go through. You don't want to use it, for example, you don't want to throw it up to somebody with a just suck it up attitude type comment where you tell them they need to do better. Going through serious trauma and trial, but it's always good to reflect. And if you see something dragging on too long, you want to start to reflect on that, and you want to keep the reasoning versus excuse mentality in mind as you go through it, not as I have to, but just I don't want to let that trial become my identity, because it causes a lot more problems later on. And that's what we're thinking about, is later on. Okay, the next one is treat your trial, your problem, no matter what it is, with the respect and dignity it deserves. And what I mean by that is making sure that you take it seriously enough, because a lot of times, and this could be in a variety of reasons. I think for me, if I've got medical problems, especially if I've got infections coming back and it's becoming a part of my life again, I need to make sure I treat it properly. I don't ignore it. I don't use it. I understand that I'm not going to feel well, and I plan better. And maybe it's making sure I talk to the proper people. Like I go to my doctor properly. If I need to talk to a counselor, I do that. For me, I've got some mentors that I talk to if I'm struggling or if I'm dealing with something that they know me, so they know when to just listen. They know when to make suggestions. Like, okay, my wife knows me really well, and there's times when I had the infections that there was still things that I needed to do, like mowing the lawn, and I'd be just not feeling well. Plenty capable of doing those things, but just did not feel like doing it. And she would look at me, and I'd be sitting on the couch, just not feeling well, maybe feeling a little bad for myself. And she would know when to say, we'll get somebody to mow the lawn, or because I need to mow the lawn, I need to do physical stuff so that I stay in shape, because otherwise it causes a whole another list of problems. If I start getting out of shape, I get sicker. So she may say, and she said this before, Frank, that lawn is not going to mow itself. And I would be like, oh, I know, you're right. And I'd get out there and I'd make myself. You wouldn't call a dentist if you had cancer. So, and what that means is you may need a mentor, you may need a friend or somebody to go through it with, to tell you, look, you should take it easy, or, maybe you need to get a move on and do some stuff. Or maybe you need professional help, like counseling, or you need to get a checkup, something like that. But take that stuff seriously, because when you put it off, all it does is manifest itself, and then it becomes a lot bigger problem later on. So it's important to reflect on that stuff and to get help, or whatever form that is, earlier than later, so that you're good going through the trial in the long term. So all of that falls into the definition of perseverance. And perseverance is just simply sticking with it and appropriately going about getting through stuff and improving and sticking with it. But once again, not in a bad way. A lot of times when we go through a trial, we can just as easily put ourselves out there too much and make things worse. So you want to go at the appropriate pace. Perseverance is just sticking to it Not too fast, but not too slow. It helps me out a lot when I'm going through stuff. The next one, along with that, is preemptively keep and form good habits. So if you're the one going through the trial, or if you're going through it with somebody, preemptively and keeping up with good habits. And what I mean by that is, as far as your day and doing stuff and exercise and speaking with people, keeping that going and making that a priority goes a long ways. If you've already formed a good habit, like for me, exercising is a big one. Now, when I've been lazy on my exercising the last year or two, there's been a lot going on. I've been in relatively good shape, and I'm getting ready to do some really physical stuff in the next year or two. And now I'm starting to get infections again too. So when I start exercising again, I'll start, it's still a little cold. I may not be outside. Riding my bike is my form of exercise. I'll get on my exercise bike, and I have the last week or so. And I'm not going to try to knock it out of the park all in one day. As a matter of fact, I've got my exercise bike in my study where I work. I've gotten on the bike and just sat there and really not done a whole lot for 5 minutes. And then I get off. And on the surface, that may seem like, well, that's not beneficial. But I'm more worried about forming the habit than I am making any headway and getting in shape in 1 week. My body doesn't respond for a month or two anyways. So if I ride 20 miles right off the bat, I'm not going to get a lot of benefit from it. And one of the things that's going to happen is I'm going to hate it, and it's going to burn me out before I ever get a habit going. So it's more important to me to every day get on that bike. The distance and time is not really important in the beginning, but I'll get that habit, and then after a month or two, if I miss a day, instead of going, oh, I didn't ride the bike today, I'm glad. It's more of a, oh man, I didn't ride the bike and I missed that. So that's the thing with good habits. You get them done preemptively and even in little steps as you go through something, to keep those habits and to start them, even though it may not have a lot of benefit at the time. You'll find in the long run, it'll help you because you'll feel like, oh, I've got that habit, so I need to do that. It'll make it a lot easier when things are stressful. So for me, I'm going to be sick. If that's the case, having that habit of preemptively of exercising will help me when I don't feel like it. Now, once again, I'll exercise appropriate, and I'm a pretty experienced bike rider, so I know how not to push it, what days not to push it, when I should push it a little bit. But having those habits, mental habits, getting up, going to bed. Sometimes when you're going through something, it's hard to get sleep and stuff, but keep trying to have those habits, getting yourself up, going to bed, eating, doing those things, visiting with people, getting out, calling somebody. I have certain people I call every week. It's a habit. And not only does that help me reach out to people and not get isolated, but it helps me if I got something to talk about, I can talk about it. They'll ask how I'm doing, how I'm going through this, and I'm sharing, and I'm getting that counseling, whatever level it is needed, so that I can keep on track. So not only through the trial, but afterwards, I can be on the right track to keep going and do those things that I need to do. Another one, and this is a big one that we don't always think about when we're going through a trial, is remember those around you go through it too. We tend to, when we're the ones going through the trial, especially if it's a horrendous one, we don't always consider that the people around us are going through it too. And sometimes I have trouble with this, and especially if you get bitter and angry as you go through the stages of going through a major trauma or a major trial. There's emotions that you go through, and sometimes we tend to get bitter and angry, and sometimes we tend to forget that those people around us are going through the trial too. They may not be feeling what we're feeling, but they're under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. So it's always good to remember that remember how we talk to them, remember to do nice things for them when we can, to be considerate that they're going through trials with us. That'll go a long ways. And that's one that I struggle with sometimes. So I have to constantly keep in mind that those people I come in contact with, people close to me especially, they're going through things too. And they're dealing with stuff. They're dealing with our trials, the people that are close to us. So keep that in mind.
Well, we finished our meeting. Such good people, a bunch of volunteers wanting to start a free clinic down here. And the county health department's just been awesome. They let us use their clinic because they know we're helping people for free. Everybody's so wonderful, but it's a struggle doing new things, and we're trying to fix the free medical clinic system, and it's a lot of work. But I feel so bad for them because we haven't had a lot of response, and it takes some time to get that going. They're good people, so I wanted to. It's getting late. We're getting ready to head back to Shawnee finally, but I wanted to take time to talk about one more that's important when I was struggling with trials, and the truth that I had to know and that I had to continually think about and learn was simplicity is better. And what that means is that a lot of times when we get in trouble, we're struggling and we're going through something, we try to come up with these complex solutions, and a lot of times because to meet whatever it is that we've got to meet, and a lot of times it works a lot better if you just start out simple. And I mentioned before, when I start my exercise programs, and I'm planning on riding a 100-mile bike race in 100-degree temperatures in about a year and a half. I am not even close to doing that. So when I start out, I'm not trying to slay a giant the first time out. I'll get on the bike, and the habits are more important, so I keep it simple to make sure I get on that bike every day. If I do 5 seconds or 5 minutes or 50 minutes, it doesn't matter, but just make sure that I don't miss getting on that bike and getting that habit. Keep things simple. If you're struggling with a loved one that's maybe going through something, uncomplicate your life during that time. It's okay if some things get let go. Take care of the important things, but keep things simple. The harder you make it, the more complicated you make it, the more chances that there are that you'll fail when something's going on. So it's okay to be simple for a while, and you don't have to do all the things that you usually do. Take care of the essentials, keep it simple, help get you through it.
Like even with this YouTube channel, I'm not a YouTube guy. See, I just hit my mic. I have to learn the production software, all that stuff. So right now it's simple. It'll get better as time goes on, and I thank you for bearing with me. But the information is important. But it's just for now it gets simple, and things will get better as time goes on, because it's important with everything I've got going on in my life that I keep things simple. I don't overcomplicate them until I get routines going and I get things done. As I get a routine done, I'll be able to do things a lot quicker, and I'll be able to deal with problems going on. So I got to consider all that, but keeping it simple is the best way to do that. Well, it's after 9. I got back to the house. I'm where I started this morning. I want to thank you. Those are just some things that I had to deal with going through trials and change and dealing with stuff. And I hope it's helpful. That it's not. I understand that we can't always do everything in the middle of trauma, in the middle of significant circumstances. But I want you to have some tools so that you don't have the long-term problems that you don't have to. I know there's a lot that goes on. It is for me too. I mean, making these YouTube videos, I'm used to keeping my medical struggles mostly to myself. I don't share a lot about them, and now I'm putting them on YouTube. But it's good. I didn't really expect to share things this way while I'm going through them, but it's good that I'll be able to show you some of the things I do, successes and failures, and stressful. We'll do some days like that where you follow me around while I'm doing stuff and the trials and tribulations that I go through.
and things that I've learned, and things that maybe I need to do better. So I want to thank you. I've got one other one. Um, if you would stay and listen, it's something that's helped me a lot. If not, thank you, and know that I'm praying for you. Um, this one has to do with uh, in the Bible. There's Saul, and just think, if you think of the Bible as a reality show, and it's a story. It tells a story, and there's characters, and there's things going on. And in the New Testament, Jesus came, and there's four Gospels that talk about his birth and his life and his death and his resurrection. And then we get to the book of Acts, where it starts to talk about the new church when he goes away, and the Christians are left starting the first Christians, and they're they're dealing with stuff. And one of the people in the story was a man named Saul. He later became Paul, but he was Saul at the time. That was his Hebrew name. And it was his job, he thought, to wipe out the new Christian sect, this group. And he did, as a Jew, he did everything he could to wipe them out until he had an encounter with Jesus on the road and was blinded for days. And then his story starts, and eventually he became um, a Christian, and he became one of the leading missionaries, and actually I think wrote more of the Bible than anybody of the New Testament. So he's talking and about his trials later, and in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 he says, "Because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given me a thorn in the flesh, a message of Satan, to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself. Concerning this, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. And he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am well content with weaknesses, with insults, with distresses, with persecutions, with difficulties. For Christ's sake, when I am weak, then I am strong." And it goes on, but it's reassuring to me. That's not to say that the trial or the trauma or what you've gone through or what you're going through is something ordained by God. We go through a lot of stuff that is the result of sin, and God never intends for us to go through it. What that does say is that it's God can work through us in times of trial, and He can use us, and He can take that trial, and He can heal us, and He can make us great. He can work through us, and He can restore us. I know in my life there's been plenty of times where I was physically not able to do something, and it was big things, and I would pray to God for healing or for whatever I needed, and He was like, not yet, not yet. I'm going to work through you. And He would do things, and it was unmistakable. It wasn't me, it was God. So He's able to work in our lives. I don't say that to say that your trial or whatever your medical illness or whatever or death is God ordained, but to say that take comfort, because God can work through that, and He can use those situations to move you where you need to go and to help you and to heal you. So take heart. And everybody, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you later.